For 5,000 years, humanity had lived in a calm, quiet existence, scattered across different worlds but avoiding contact with any other civilizations. Humans had long ago mastered space travel and spread among distant planets, but curiosity about the stars beyond their own systems had been subdued. People had settled into their lives, working, building, and exploring in small ways, but always with the sense that they were alone. The galaxy was silent. For centuries, humans looked into the darkness of space and saw nothing but emptiness. That emptiness became a part of their lives. Children grew up hearing stories of other worlds, but never of other intelligent life. Universities taught about stars and planets, but not about alien civilizations. Even the most adventurous scientists assumed that humanity might be the only intelligent species in the universe. Life on these distant colonies was peaceful, but not without its challenges. Societies evolved independently, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in conflict. Yet the lack of a common enemy kept the universe quiet. People were focused on survival, innovation, and culture, not war. The political leaders of each planet often argued among themselves, but none ever imagined facing a threat beyond human capacity. And so, humans lived their lives in a long, comfortable silence, a silence that became almost sacred over the centuries. Then, without warning, everything changed. On one ordinary day, deep space monitors picked up a signal unlike any they had ever received. At first, scientists thought it was a glitch, a mistake in their equipment, or a random burst of energy. But as more instruments detected it, the truth became impossible to deny. The signal was intelligent. It was a message from an alien civilization, not just a natural phenomenon, but a clear and deliberate communication. Every scientist, every political leader, every government agency began to pay attention. The message was terrifying. It was not a greeting. It was not a request for friendship. It was a demand. Humanity was told to submit or face destruction. The words, though transmitted across light years, carried weight like a hammer, striking the minds of every human being who learned of them. Panic spread quickly. Families huddled together as news broadcasts repeated the alien demand. Governments called emergency meetings, scrambling to understand what this meant. Some leaders wanted to respond peacefully, hoping the aliens could be reasoned with. Others believed that compliance was humanity's only chance of survival. But the fear in the hearts of humans was overwhelming. No one had ever imagined facing a civilization so powerful that it could wipe out entire planets with ease. Yet, amid fear, a spark of determination began to grow. While some humans panicked, others realized that this was the moment their species had been preparing for, even if unknowingly. Humanity had spent thousands of years in silence, surviving, learning, and growing. This long period of peace had given humans time to develop technology, to master travel among the stars, and to understand their own capabilities. And now, for the first time, that preparation was going to be tested. Scientists worked tirelessly to decode the signal, to understand the technology of the aliens and to find any weaknesses. Military leaders began strategies for defense, even knowing that their weapons might be primitive compared to what the aliens could unleash. Humanity had never fought another civilization before, but the instinct to survive ran deep. Amid the confusion, the lives of ordinary people were transformed. Students who had never imagined they would hold a weapon found themselves training for battle. Families worried about loved ones who were sent to join fleets that had never faced combat. Entire communities began to change as fear and hope intertwined. The media broadcast images of fleets being mobilized, of scientists working in labs around the clock, of leaders calling for unity among planets. The story of humanity's awakening spread across every colony, every world, and every settlement. For the first time in 5,000 years, humans were no longer just inhabitants of the galaxy. They were participants in a fight for survival. The arrival of the alien message also revealed how unprepared humans truly were. For all the technological progress they had made, humans had never imagined an enemy that could think and plan across the stars in ways far beyond their comprehension. Entire debates erupted over how to respond. Some leaders argued that humanity should hide, retreating to isolated colonies in the outer reaches of known space. Others insisted that retreat would only make them weaker, that they needed to face the threat head-on. Arguments were heated, often spilling into public discourse, as people struggled to understand what it meant to face a civilization unlike any they had known. But even as uncertainty gripped the galaxy, small victories began to appear. Communication networks began to adapt, allowing humans to share information faster than the aliens might have expected. Scientists discovered subtle patterns in the signal that hinted at alien weaknesses, or at least points where humans could anticipate their moves. Engineers began constructing new weapons and defensive systems, combining human ingenuity with the lessons learned from centuries of exploration and survival. Slowly, humans realized that while they were facing an enemy far more advanced, they were not powerless. Their creativity, adaptability, and sheer stubbornness could become their greatest weapons. The story focuses on these human reactions, showing the diversity of responses across the galaxy. On one planet, a young engineer works tirelessly to adapt propulsion systems for emergency fleets. On another, a teacher gathers children in a secure space to explain the situation calmly, teaching hope instead of fear. Across the human worlds, ordinary people are forced to confront extraordinary circumstances. They witness the fragility of their civilizations, the potential loss of everything they have built, and yet they also discover resilience they did not know existed. Fear transforms into determination, and despair transforms into action. The awakening is not just about preparation for war, it is a test of human character. The 5,000 years of silence had created a species capable of great achievements, but also of complacency. The alien message shatters that complacency, forcing humanity to confront its vulnerabilities and rise to the occasion. Leaders are tested, heroes are born, and ordinary citizens discover courage they had never imagined. Families cling together, communities unite, and planets that had long acted independently begin to cooperate. The human spirit, quiet for millennia, begins to roar. Even as fear persists, hope emerges. Scientists make breakthroughs that offer a glimmer of possibility. Engineers build vessels capable of traveling faster, shields that might protect against alien fire, and weapons that combine human ingenuity with the resources of entire planets. Military strategists form alliances, coordinating fleets across light years, preparing for the first confrontation that could decide the fate of humanity. The narrative captures the tension of these moments, the mixture of anxiety, excitement, and determination that courses through every human being as the reality sinks in. The galaxy is no longer a silent place, and humanity must step into a role it has never known before. Amid all this, human culture, emotion, and individuality shine through. People write letters to loved ones, recording their hopes and fears. Artists create works inspired by the impending confrontation, imagining courage and resilience. Communities share meals, prayers, and stories, finding comfort in each other as the threat grows. The awakening is not just technological or strategic, it is deeply human. It is about facing the unknown, confronting fear, and discovering the capacity to fight not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. By the end of this first stage, humanity is no longer silent. The 5,000 years of isolation have ended. The aliens have spoken and humans have answered. Not yet with weapons, not yet with victory, but with awareness, unity, and determination. They have been called to war, and they have begun to rise to the challenge. This part of the story sets the stage for everything that follows. The preparation, the battles, the losses, and ultimately the triumphs that will define the species. It is a moment of transformation. A species that once lived quietly in a vast universe now begins to act with purpose, courage, and strategy. The first part of the story shows the awakening of humanity in response to a threat unlike any they have ever faced. It is a story of fear, hope, and the undeniable spark that makes humans ready to answer the call to war no matter the cost. The stage is set, the players are in motion, and the galaxy is about to witness a species that had once been silent, now ready to fight for its very existence. The moment the alien message reached humanity, fear and uncertainty swept across every colony, city, and settlement. The reality of the situation was undeniable. Humans were being threatened by a civilization far older, stronger, and more advanced. Yet amid the fear, a determination began to grow. Humanity had been silent for 5,000 years, but now, for the first time, survival demanded action. Leaders, scientists, engineers, and ordinary people were all thrust into a world that required rapid transformation. There was no time to hesitate, no opportunity for slow preparation. Every planet, every colony had to mobilize at once, turning the peaceful lives of millions into a society ready for war. Governments around the galaxy convened emergency councils. Leaders who had previously argued over trivial matters were forced to work together. Plans that once took months or years to discuss were now being implemented in days. Political rivalries were set aside, replaced with a shared understanding that the future of the human species was at stake. Scientists worked day and night, decoding the alien message to learn more about the enemy. Every fragment of information became vital. Even small discoveries, a weakness in the alien communication protocol, a pattern in their energy signatures, were celebrated as victories because they offered hope. While governments and scientists worked on strategy, engineers and military planners began the monumental task of preparing for battle. Humans had traveled the stars and built magnificent colonies, but they had never prepared for a war on this scale. Entire fleets had to be assembled, retrofitted, and upgraded. Ordinary transport ships were converted into armed war vessels. Space stations were fortified, turning them into defensive bastions. Factories that had once produced tools and machines for exploration were now producing weapons, armor, and supplies for a species-wide army. Human ingenuity became the greatest asset, as engineers adapted existing technology to meet new, urgent challenges. They worked tirelessly, inventing faster engines, stronger shields, and devastating new weapons that could give humanity a fighting chance. Training ordinary people to become soldiers became another urgent priority. For thousands of years, humanity had known peace and many people had never handled weapons. Yet now they had no choice. Volunteers from every colony stepped forward, while others were drafted, leaving families and loved ones behind. Training camps sprang up across planets, space stations, and even orbital platforms. Instructors pushed recruits to their limits, teaching them how to handle advanced weapons, how to pilot ships in combat, and how to survive under conditions they had never imagined. Fear was constant, but determination grew stronger. Young people who had never dreamed of fighting learned to trust their instincts, to act quickly, and to rely on each other. Amid this transformation, personal stories emerged that captured the essence of humanity's courage and vulnerability. On one mining colony, a father trained his teenage daughter to handle defensive equipment, teaching her not just how to survive, but how to think strategically. On a distant agricultural planet, a group of students and teachers turned classrooms into training centers, practicing maneuvers that might one day save their worlds. Ordinary citizens began performing extraordinary acts. Doctors volunteered for field units, engineers repaired ships in dangerous zones, and families banded together to support each other emotionally. These stories showed that humanity's strength was not only in technology, but in courage, creativity, and unity. At the same time, cities transformed into hubs of preparation and defense. Streets once filled with markets, schools, and leisure centers were now lined with recruitment offices, supply depots, and communication stations. Buildings were reinforced, shelters were constructed, and transportation networks were reorganized to move people and resources efficiently. Entire populations were forced to adapt to a new rhythm of life, alert, vigilant, and ready for the worst. Even cultural and social practices changed. Entertainment became educational. News focused on preparation, survival, and strategy. Music, art, and storytelling adapted to the new reality, helping people process fear, loss, and hope simultaneously. Humanity also began reaching out across the stars, coordinating communication between distant colonies. For the first time in millennia, planets that had developed independently began sharing strategies, technology, and intelligence. This unprecedented cooperation revealed both the weaknesses and the strengths of humanity. There were misunderstandings, delays, and disagreements, but the shared goal kept everyone moving forward. Scientists exchanged research on alien technology. Pilots shared maneuvers and tactics that had worked in simulations. Governments coordinated fleets and defense strategies, learning to trust one another in ways they never had before. Humanity was transforming from scattered civilizations into a united force. As preparation continued, small experiments and skirmishes gave hope. Simulation battles, training exercises, and early defensive encounters allowed humans to learn from mistakes and refine their tactics. Engineers discovered that combining seemingly simple technologies in innovative ways could create surprisingly effective results. For example, Small ships working in coordinated swarms proved capable of distracting or delaying alien scouts. Energy shields, when layered with older forms of armor, provided unexpected defense against preliminary attacks. Every success, no matter how small, boosted morale and reinforced the belief that humans were not helpless. However, the process of preparation was not without hardship. Families were separated, some never to be reunited. People grew tired from endless work and constant stress. Anxiety was everywhere, sometimes boiling over into anger and despair. In many places, humans began to see the emotional cost of war preparation. Sleepless nights, endless drills, and the constant shadow of fear. Despite these hardships, humanity refused to give in. The shared danger became a unifying force, and people found comfort in each other's strength. Communities developed resilience, supporting each other in ways that had never been necessary during the quiet years of peace. This period of preparation also highlighted human adaptability and creativity. Faced with an enemy far more advanced, humans had to think differently. Conventional tactics were insufficient. Scientists experimented with unconventional weapons. Pilots developed untested maneuvers that relied on speed, unpredictability, and human intuition rather than raw technology. Engineers repurposed existing materials to create weapons and defenses that the aliens might not anticipate. The human mind, honed over millennia of exploration and problem-solving, became a critical tool. Each day brought new inventions, new tactics, and new hope that humanity might survive. Despite the tension, hope and excitement coexisted with fear. Young people trained with vigor. Older citizens shared wisdom, and leaders inspired with speeches that reminded everyone of humanity's history of survival. They reminded people that humans had always faced challenges and had always adapted. The alien threat was unprecedented, yes, but so was humanity's ingenuity. The narrative showed the determination that could emerge when a species refused to accept defeat. Even as the stakes grew higher, people discovered courage within themselves and in each other. By the end of this stage, humanity had begun to transform completely. Ordinary civilians had become soldiers, students had become strategists, engineers had become weapons designers, and scattered colonies had begun functioning as a coordinated civilization. The long period of isolation was over. Humans were no longer silent observers of the galaxy. They were active participants in their own destiny. Though the fear of the unknown was still present, the foundations for resistance were firmly established. Humanity had begun to answer the call to war, not with blind recklessness, but with preparation, ingenuity, and unity. This part of the story emphasizes that preparation is more than technology. It is transformation. Humanity learns to fight not just with machines and weapons, but with courage, intelligence, and cooperation. It is a story of ordinary people rising to extraordinary challenges, of fear being channeled into determination, and of a species discovering its potential when faced with the most daunting threat it had ever encountered. By the time the first battle approached, humans were no longer unprepared. They were ready, in body, mind, and spirit, to face the enemy that had shattered their long silence. The first encounter with the alien forces was nothing like humanity had ever imagined. For thousands of years, humans had lived quietly in their colonies, believing the galaxy was empty or at most only filled with distant stars. They had trained, they had prepared, they had built fleets and weapons. But nothing could have fully conveyed the reality of facing an enemy so advanced. When the alien ships arrived, they were vast, gleaming with a strange energy that humans could barely comprehend. Their movements were precise, coordinated, and terrifyingly fast. Entire fleets of human ships, despite their upgrades and careful preparation, were no match for the first wave of attacks. Planets watched in horror as reports of destruction streamed in, some transmissions never returning at all. The first battles were chaotic and brutal. Human pilots, though trained for months, found themselves in a nightmare. They had imagined fighting, imagined danger, but never anything like this. Alien weapons struck with deadly accuracy, vaporizing ships in seconds. Defense shields flared and collapsed under forces humans had only theorized about. Entire fleets were destroyed in minutes, leaving surviving ships scattered and confused. It was a moment that revealed the harsh truth. Preparation alone was not enough. Humans had to learn quickly, adapt in real time, and rely not only on technology but also on their instincts, courage, and teamwork. Amid the destruction, Moments of heroism shone through. Pilots and soldiers faced impossible odds and yet refused to surrender. A young fleet commander, barely 30, led a small squadron into the heart of an alien formation to distract them from attacking civilian colonies. A group of engineers on a damaged station worked without rest to repair weapon systems, even as alarms blared and the hull shook from nearby explosions. Ordinary people found extraordinary strength within themselves. Civilians volunteered to take over critical tasks after trained personnel were lost. The story of the first encounter was not just about loss. It was about human courage, resilience, and the ability to improvise under pressure. The aliens themselves were unlike anything humans had expected. They were intelligent, yes, but also strategic in ways that humans struggled to predict. Their ships moved with synchronized precision, their energy weapons designed to bypass human defenses, and their tactics aimed to test, confuse, and overwhelm. Every engagement revealed more of the aliens' power, yet also revealed small exploitable patterns. Human scientists studied debris from destroyed ships, engineers analyzed energy emissions, and pilots kept careful logs of every encounter. Slowly, humans began to understand that while the aliens were terrifyingly powerful, they were not invincible. Their strength lay in their technology and experience. But humans had unpredictability, creativity, and the willingness to risk everything, advantages the aliens did not expect. The first contact also tested humanity's leadership. Leaders faced impossible choices: which colonies to protect, which fleets to risk, and how to maintain morale in the face of staggering loss. Some leaders faltered, paralyzed by the enormity of the threat. Others rose to the occasion, rallying their people with speeches, strategies, and personal acts of courage. One governor, after losing half of his fleet, personally led an evacuation of civilians, coordinating with neighboring colonies to save thousands. Another military leader devised an unorthodox strategy that used small, agile ships to harass and confuse the alien forces, buying precious time for the human population. Leadership in this moment of crisis became as crucial as technology or training. While the battles raged in space, life on the planets and colonies also changed dramatically. Civilians experienced the terror of invasion indirectly, as reports of destruction reached every home. Schools and workplaces became command centers. Medical facilities struggled to handle the injured, and communities rallied to support one another. Fear was everywhere, but so was determination. Parents taught their children to remain calm, to understand the importance of preparation and strategy. Communities developed rapid response networks to evacuate civilians, deliver supplies, and provide emergency care. Humans were learning not just to fight, but to survive in a world suddenly filled with unimaginable danger. Amid the chaos, humans began to innovate in ways that shocked even themselves. Facing an enemy whose power far exceeded theirs, they relied on creativity and improvisation. Pilots discovered that erratic flight patterns, previously considered reckless, could help smaller ships evade the aliens' targeting systems. Engineers used damaged alien technology to reverse engineer weapons and shields. Scientists developed new communication protocols to coordinate fleets across vast distances, despite alien interference. Humanity's ability to adapt quickly became one of its most potent weapons. Every small success, every clever maneuver, gave hope that survival was possible. The first contact also revealed the emotional cost of war. Survivors of early battles carried trauma that would affect them forever. Families grieved lost loved ones. Entire communities mourned as planets they had called home were destroyed. But even in grief, humanity found purpose. Stories emerged of people risking their lives to save others, of strangers coming together to protect children and elders, of ordinary citizens performing heroic acts in the face of terror. These human moments, small and large, showed that courage was not only measured by victory, but by the willingness to act, to resist, and to protect others, even when the outcome was uncertain. Through these initial confrontations, humans began to notice something crucial. The aliens, though immensely powerful, were not perfect. Their tactics, while devastating, had patterns. They were strong in attack, but slower to respond to unexpected maneuvers. Human ingenuity, unpredictability, and the willingness to take risks became significant factors in even the smallest skirmishes. Teams of pilots and engineers worked tirelessly to identify weaknesses, experiment with strategies, and coordinate attacks. Slowly, humans began turning the tide in small but meaningful ways. Even one successful mission, One clever use of technology or one daring maneuver boosted morale across entire colonies. Humanity was learning that survival depended not on avoiding loss but on learning, adapting, and acting together. The story of First Contact also highlighted the diversity of human experience. Some people fought bravely in space, risking everything on daring missions. Others provided support on planets, organizing logistics, treating the injured, and maintaining communications. Artists, teachers, and scientists continued to inspire, documenting events, providing hope, and preserving the culture that gave humans strength. Every role mattered. The war was not just fought in the vastness of space, but in the hearts and minds of every human being. Courage, intelligence, and empathy became as vital as weapons and shields. The psychological aspect of First Contact was immense. Humans had to confront the reality that the galaxy was no longer empty, that their isolation had ended in the most terrifying way possible. Fear and uncertainty were constant companions, yet they also spurred action. Humans discovered inner reserves of strength they had never known. Ordinary individuals found courage under fire. Leaders made impossible decisions with clarity and purpose. Engineers solved problems under immense pressure. Scientists worked tirelessly to understand the alien threat. Every person had a role, and every action contributed to survival. By the end of the First Contact, humanity had changed forever. They had experienced loss, destruction, and fear on a scale unimaginable in peacetime. Yet they had also discovered resilience, adaptability, and courage beyond measure. Pilots, soldiers, scientists, engineers, and civilians had all contributed to a collective effort that had allowed humans to survive the initial assaults. The alien enemy, though still overwhelmingly powerful, had been tested. Humanity had learned that they were not helpless, that even against impossible odds, ingenuity, bravery, and determination could make a difference. The First Contact marked a turning point in the war. It was no longer theoretical, no longer a question of what if. Humans had faced the enemy and survived. They had learned lessons that would shape the next stages of the conflict. They understood the cost of failure, the value of cooperation, and the power of courage under pressure. Humanity had begun to transition from preparation to action, from fear to calculated defiance. The first encounter had shattered the illusion of peace, but it had also awakened the true potential of a species that had lived quietly for 5,000 years. In these moments of extreme danger, humanity also discovered hope. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, there were victories, small and large, that inspired confidence. Pilots who survived impossible missions shared their strategies. Engineers repaired and improved ships faster than anyone thought possible. Communities that had been isolated for centuries began working together. The First Contact was a trial by fire, but humans had survived. They had proven, to themselves at least, that they could face an enemy far superior in strength and technology. Humanity had learned its first lesson in the brutal reality of interstellar war. Survival required courage, unity, innovation, and the willingness to act when every outcome was uncertain. By the time the first wave of alien attacks subsided, humans had emerged battered, shaken, and forever changed. They had lost ships, lives, and resources, but they had gained experience, knowledge, and a sense of purpose. The initial shock had revealed weaknesses, but also strengths. Humanity had learned to adapt quickly, think creatively, and work together across vast distances. They had faced the unimaginable and survived. The story of First Contact was not just about battle. It was about the awakening of a species that had lived quietly for millennia, now discovering its potential in the crucible of war. The first encounter set the stage for everything that would follow. Humans now knew the enemy. They knew their strength and they knew the cost of failure. They also knew, for the first time, that victory was possible, not through strength alone, but through intelligence, courage, and unity. The alien threat had brought humanity together, transforming fear into determination, chaos into strategy, and loss into lessons. Humanity had survived the First Contact, and in doing so, had begun to rise to the challenge of answering the call to war in a galaxy that had finally awakened them from 5,000 years of silence. After months of relentless conflict and devastating losses, humanity began to see a glimmer of hope. The First Contact had been brutal, and the early battles had left scars on ships, planets, and hearts. Yet, amid the chaos and despair, humans discovered a truth that would change the course of the war. They had strengths the alien enemy did not anticipate. The aliens were powerful, highly advanced, and ruthless, but they lacked human unpredictability, creativity, and resilience. As humans adapted, they began to turn the tide slowly but surely, learning not only to survive but to fight with strategy, courage, and determination. The turning point began with small victories. Tactical strikes that humans had previously considered impossible succeeded because they were unconventional. Pilots used hit-and-run tactics, exploiting weak points in the alien formations. Engineers repurposed captured alien technology to enhance their own ship's defenses. Scientists found ways to disrupt alien communication signals, creating confusion in enemy ranks. Each of these small successes had an outsized effect, boosting morale across colonies and fleets. It became clear that humans did not need to match the aliens in sheer firepower. They needed to match them in ingenuity and unpredictability. Humans began working together in ways they never had before. Planets that had been isolated for thousands of years started sharing resources, technology, and strategic information. Fleets coordinated attacks across light years, synchronizing maneuvers in real time despite the vast distances. Scientists and engineers collaborated across multiple systems, inventing new weapons, shields, and defense strategies. Ordinary citizens contributed too, volunteering in supply chains, medical units, and communications networks. The story emphasized that survival depended on unity, and humanity discovered that it could achieve extraordinary things when every individual, no matter their role, worked together toward a single goal. Leadership played a crucial role in this phase. Commanders learned from early mistakes, adjusting strategies to anticipate the alien tactics. Some risked their lives in daring maneuvers to protect critical colonies, while others made difficult decisions to withdraw from hopeless battles, saving lives for later engagements. Leaders inspired hope by being present in times of danger, often standing alongside soldiers, engineers, and civilians alike. These leaders became symbols of resilience, demonstrating that courage and determination were contagious. Humans began to believe that they could not only defend themselves but could fight back effectively. The emotional resilience of humanity became as important as its technological and strategic advancements. After months of fear and loss, people had grown stronger. Survivors of early battles shared their experiences, teaching others how to cope with stress, make rapid decisions under pressure, and act decisively in life-or-death situations. Communities supported one another, finding comfort and strength in solidarity. Families reunited when possible, and even in tragedy, humans discovered moments of hope and unity. The story emphasized that humanity's greatest weapon was not its fleets or weapons, but its spirit, the ability to endure, adapt, and rise after every setback. Human ingenuity reached new heights during this phase. Engineers invented hybrid technologies, combining human designs with captured alien systems. Scientists developed new strategies to anticipate alien movements, using simulations and predictive algorithms that allowed fleets to strike at critical points in enemy formations. Pilots learned to exploit the alien reliance on rigid tactics, using daring maneuvers to outsmart them. Every successful mission, every clever strategy added to humanity's growing confidence. The alien forces, though still powerful, began to encounter unexpected resistance. What had once seemed like unstoppable invincibility was now being challenged by human creativity, courage, and determination. The turning tide also highlighted the sacrifices required for survival. Humanity's victories came at a cost. Ships were lost, colonies damaged, and lives sacrificed. Yet these losses forged a deeper sense of unity and purpose. Survivors learned to honor the fallen not just with mourning, but by continuing the fight. Stories of heroism emerged everywhere. Pilots who gave their lives to save entire fleets, engineers who risked death to repair critical systems, civilians who protected their communities in impossible circumstances. These acts of bravery inspired others, proving that courage could flourish even under the darkest conditions. In this period, humans also learned to leverage psychological warfare. They discovered that the aliens were not entirely immune to confusion, fear, or misdirection. Small, calculated risks disrupted enemy formations, giving humans the advantage in critical moments. Human fleets began using decoys, ambushes, and coordinated diversions to outmaneuver their superior enemy. These strategies showcased the unique human ability to think creatively under pressure and adapt quickly to changing circumstances. humanity realized that survival did not mean mimicking the alien forces, but finding ways to use their own strengths to their advantage. Communication became vital. Humans developed faster and more secure interstellar networks, allowing fleets, colonies, and strategic command centers to share information in real time. Intelligence gathered from battles and scouting missions was quickly distributed, ensuring that no fleet or colony faced the enemy unprepared. Scientists shared discoveries that improved weaponry and defensive technology, while engineers coordinated repairs and upgrades across multiple systems. Coordination became a defining feature of human resistance, and the story highlighted how effective organization, combined with creativity and courage, could overcome even overwhelming odds. Humanity also learned to adapt emotionally to the pressures of war. Prolonged conflict tested patience, courage, and resilience. People experienced grief, fear, and fatigue, yet they found ways to maintain hope. Communities held ceremonies to honor the fallen, while schools, cultural centers, and art initiatives helped preserve human culture and morale. Even in the darkest hours, stories, music, and art reminded humans of what they were fighting for. These emotional connections became as crucial to survival as weapons or strategy. They sustained the spirit of humanity and ensured that despite adversity, people continued to fight with determination and unity. This period also revealed the rise of human heroes. Ordinary individuals became extraordinary through their courage and innovation. Pilots executed daring missions that saved thousands. Scientists discovered weaknesses in alien systems. Leaders inspired entire fleets to hold positions and counter enemy attacks. Even civilians played critical roles in logistics, repairs, and medical support. Humanity was learning that heroism was not limited to the battlefield. It could be found in every act of courage, sacrifice, and ingenuity. The narrative highlighted these human stories, showing that the strength of a species lay not only in technology, but in its people. As the war progressed, humans discovered that alien tactics, while advanced, were predictable in certain ways. By observing patterns in the enemy's attacks, fleets could anticipate movements and prepare countermeasures. Engineers developed specialized ships and weapons to exploit these weaknesses. Pilots used daring, unpredictable strategies that the aliens could not foresee. Slowly, humans began winning skirmishes that once seemed impossible. Every small victory inspired the next, creating momentum that was as psychological as it was tactical. Confidence spread, and humans began to believe that they could survive and even prevail. Unity, ingenuity, and resilience became the pillars of humanity's fight. Communities, fleets, and colonies worked together across immense distances. Every success, no matter how minor, added to the collective belief that survival was possible. The story showed that even a species long isolated by silence could rise to confront overwhelming danger when it embraced its strengths, creativity, courage, and cooperation. Humanity had transformed from a scattered, fearful species into a force capable of strategic, coordinated resistance. By the end of this phase, the tide of war had begun to shift in humanity's favor. The alien forces, though still formidable, were now encountering resistance they could not fully predict or control. Humanity had discovered its own power, its ability to adapt, innovate, and act with courage. Fleets were better coordinated, colonies more resilient, and people more determined than ever before. The long period of preparation, training, and small victories had paid off. Humanity had begun to turn the tide, proving that even against an overwhelmingly advanced enemy, determination, unity, and intelligence could alter the course of history. The story of this turning point emphasized that victory was not just about weapons or technology. It was about the human spirit, the creativity, courage, and resilience that allowed a species long isolated to rise against impossible odds. Losses continued, but each challenge faced strengthened humanity's resolve. By facing despair, adapting, and innovating, humans became stronger, more strategic, and more united than ever. The turning of the tide was a moment of awakening, a revelation that humanity was capable of greatness when tested, and that no force, however powerful, could fully extinguish their will to survive. Part 4 set the stage for the final confrontation. Humans, battle-hardened, experienced, and united, were no longer merely reacting to the alien threat. They were taking control. Their victories, small and large, had built confidence, strategy, and morale. Communities and fleets were prepared for decisive action. Leaders, Heroes and ordinary citizens had learned the true meaning of sacrifice and courage. Humanity had evolved, not only in skill and strategy but in spirit, ready to face the ultimate challenge of the war that would determine the future of their species. The final phase of the conflict had arrived. Humanity, battle-hardened and transformed by months of relentless struggle, stood on the brink of either ultimate triumph or devastating defeat. The alien forces, though still incredibly powerful, were now faced with a species that had adapted, innovated, and grown stronger under pressure. Every colony, every fleet, every human heart had been forged in fire. People had endured unimaginable loss, witnessed entire planets destroyed, and survived assaults that would have broken any untested civilization. Now, for the first time, humans were not just defending, they were taking the fight to the enemy with coordinated strength, strategy, and determination. Preparation for the final confrontation required every ounce of human ingenuity. Fleets were mobilized across the galaxy, coordinating movements over unimaginable distances. Ships that had once been simple transport or defensive vessels were now equipped with advanced weaponry, hybrid shields, and systems designed to exploit weaknesses discovered during prior skirmishes. Engineers worked tirelessly to repair and upgrade vessels, often risking their lives in dangerous space zones or near damaged stations. Scientists refined strategies based on months of observation, tracking alien behavior, predicting movements, and designing tactics that would allow humans to strike at critical points simultaneously. Every detail mattered. Every plan had to be precise yet flexible enough to adapt to the unpredictable enemy. On the planets themselves, humans were equally prepared. Communities fortified settlements, ensuring that civilians could survive attacks while contributing to the war effort. Medical units, supply chains, and communication networks operated at peak efficiency, providing crucial support to fleets in space. Families once torn apart by fear and evacuation now found purpose in supporting the final campaign. Children were taught to understand the importance of courage, cooperation, and resilience, while adults worked tirelessly to maintain morale, sustain energy, and coordinate efforts. Humanity had become a civilization united in purpose, every individual contributing to the collective fight for survival. The final engagement began with a series of coordinated strikes against alien supply and communication lines. Humans applied everything they had learned: agility, deception, strategy, and unpredictability. Small strike teams moved quickly and decisively, taking out key targets before the alien forces could respond. Larger fleets used feints and decoys to lure enemy ships into traps. Every maneuver relied on human creativity and daring, often involving incredible risks. Yet for every moment of danger there was also heroism, as individuals put themselves in harm's way to protect others, ensure the success of a mission, or buy time for fleets to regroup. The battles were intense and relentless. Alien firepower remained devastating, capable of obliterating human ships in seconds. Yet humans had learned to anticipate, adapt, and exploit weaknesses. Coordinated attacks overwhelmed alien defenses at critical points, demonstrating that intelligence, strategy, and human unpredictability could rival technological superiority. Pilots performed daring maneuvers that confounded alien targeting systems. Engineers and scientists continued to innovate in real time, repairing ships mid-battle and recalibrating weapon systems on the fly. Every successful strike strengthened morale, while every failure provided crucial lessons for the next engagement. Leadership during this phase was more critical than ever. Fleet commanders risked everything, leading from the front, making split-second decisions that could determine the fate of entire colonies. Political leaders coordinated resources across systems, ensuring that every fleet had the support it needed. Ordinary citizens, though not directly involved in combat, played vital roles, maintaining supply chains, managing communications, and providing intelligence. Humanity was functioning as a unified organism, where every individual, regardless of role, contributed to the ultimate goal. The war had become not just a battle in space, but a demonstration of what a species could achieve when united by purpose, courage, and determination. Amid the strategy and battle, the emotional stakes were immense. Humans mourned the fallen, celebrated victories, and shared stories of bravery that inspired others to continue fighting. Entire fleets carried the memory of those lost into battle, honoring their sacrifice by pressing forward with greater determination. Communities on distant colonies provided emotional support to families and soldiers, ensuring that the human spirit remained unbroken, even under the heaviest strain. Courage, sacrifice, and hope became as crucial as weapons, guiding humanity through the darkest hours of the war. As the final confrontation reached its climax, humans executed their most daring strategy yet, a coordinated assault on the core of the alien forces. Every fleet moved in perfect synchronization, exploiting weaknesses discovered over months of combat. Pilots navigated treacherous battlefields, engineers ensured weapon systems operated flawlessly, and scientists provided real-time intelligence to guide maneuvers. Civilians watched, prayed, and contributed in every way possible, knowing that the outcome would determine the future of their species. It was a moment of unity, courage, and determination, where every human action contributed to a shared victory or potential annihilation. The battle was fierce and unrelenting. Alien defenses were powerful, adaptive, and ruthless, yet humanity's unpredictability, ingenuity, and sheer determination gave them an edge. Human ships executed coordinated attacks using speed, deception, and strategy to bypass or neutralize alien weapons. Engineers worked miracles repairing critical systems under fire. Pilots risked everything to strike vital targets, often knowing the chances of survival were slim. Yet every human action was purposeful, calculated, and driven by the shared desire to survive and protect their species. The clash of civilizations reached heights of intensity and suspense that no one could have imagined. During the heat of the final battles, human ingenuity shone brightest. Scientists and engineers discovered ways to exploit the alien reliance on energy systems, creating disruptions that caused confusion in enemy ranks. Pilots executed maneuvers that leveraged human reflexes and unpredictability, outsmarting the alien targeting systems. Coordinated attacks across multiple fronts ensured that the enemy could not defend all points at once. Every element of human strategy relied on lessons learned from previous encounters, a combination of courage, knowledge, and adaptability that allowed humanity to challenge even the most technologically superior enemy. Heroism was everywhere. Ordinary humans became legends. Pilots who had trained for months executed missions that saved entire colonies. Engineers repaired and upgraded ships while under direct fire. Scientists made last-minute breakthroughs that allowed fleets to strike critical enemy systems. Leaders inspired entire populations, demonstrating courage under fire and strategic brilliance. Civilians contributed to supply chains, intelligence gathering, and morale support. Every act of bravery, large or small, contributed to the overall success of the campaign, proving that humanity's greatest strength was not just technology, but its spirit. As the final assault pressed forward, the alien forces began to falter. Their weapons, while still formidable, could no longer counter the coordinated strategy, adaptability, and ingenuity of humans. Fleets maneuvered with precision, targeting critical systems, disrupting energy flows, and forcing alien ships into traps. The humans' ability to adapt faster than the aliens anticipated turned the tide decisively. What had seemed impossible only months before, the survival and eventual triumph of a species long isolated, was now within reach. The alien empire, once seemingly invincible, faced a new reality. Humans would not submit, retreat, or surrender. The climax of the war was intense, with moments of uncertainty, danger, and suspense. Ships were destroyed, sacrifices were made, and human lives were lost. Yet every victory, no matter how small, contributed to a growing sense of momentum. The aliens, unable to fully anticipate human creativity and determination, found themselves on the defensive. Human strategy, adaptability, and unity had become unstoppable forces, turning fear and uncertainty into calculated action. Humanity had transformed from a species that had lived in silence for thousands of years into a force capable of challenging and defeating a civilization far older and stronger. After the decisive battles, the final victory came not from overwhelming power, but from strategy, courage, and relentless determination. Human fleets coordinated one final strike at the heart of the alien forces, neutralizing their command systems and forcing a retreat. The aliens, confronted by a species that refused to surrender and adapted faster than they could predict, had no choice but to withdraw. Humanity had won, not easily, not without sacrifice, but decisively. The galaxy that had once been silent was now filled with the voice of a species that had proven its resilience, ingenuity, and courage. The aftermath of victory was bittersweet. Humanity had survived, but at great cost. Millions of lives had been lost, fleets destroyed, and colonies damaged. Yet the survivors celebrated not just survival, but the courage, unity, and determination that had made victory possible. Communities rebuilt, honoring the fallen while preparing for the future. Scientists, engineers, and leaders began to study what had been learned, ensuring that humanity would never again be caught unprepared. Families reunited, communities thrived, and humans reflected on what it meant to be part of a species that had endured unimaginable trials and emerged victorious. The story concluded with humanity reflecting on its place in the universe. 5,000 years of silence had ended, replaced by a species that had faced annihilation and refused to yield. Humans had discovered their true strength, not in weapons alone, but in courage, creativity, adaptability, and unity. They had faced fear, loss, and uncertainty, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. The galaxy would never again underestimate humanity, and humans themselves would never again doubt their capacity to survive and thrive. The final chapter was a testament to the indomitable spirit of a species that had answered the call to war, endured and triumphed against overwhelming odds. In the end, humanity stood victorious, forever changed. They had fought, suffered, and sacrificed, but they had also grown, learned, and united. The war had tested every aspect of their existence: technology, strategy, courage, and morality, and humanity had risen to the challenge. The galaxy had witnessed the emergence of a species that would never again be silent, a species capable of great courage, innovation, and unity. The story closed on a note of hope, resilience, and pride. Humans had survived the impossible, and in doing so, had truly discovered the power within themselves to shape their destiny.